Welcome to Beyond Coaching, a podcast from the Impactful Coaching Project. Join Rob Ramsire as he interviews coaching and sport leaders about holistic coaching and the lessons they have learned over time.
Today on Beyond Coaching, we pick back up with Shaun Reid to continue our conversation on what is happening inside youth sports and what needs to change. In part one, we diagnose the system and what he thinks is going on. And in part two, we push forward into practical solutions and parents' expectations, playing time, pay for play, and all sorts of topics. Shaun gives some clear, grounded advice for creating a healthy environment for kids. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to Beyond Coaching, a podcast from the Impactful Coaching Project. Join Rob Ramsire as he interviews coaching and sport leaders about holistic coaching and the lessons they have learned over time.
And the first conversation, we kind of just diagnosed what was going on, got Shaun's perspective in youth sports. And now we're going to get a little more into the nitty gritty on the options and ways to fix the problem. So, Shaun, let's jump right in. If you could name one root issue in youth sports now, what would it be and how would you attack fixing it?
Oof. I think I know, well, my opinion, what I've noticed in a lot of the research and just my, experiences is initially I thought it was over-involved parents, but I think that's kind of a broad, uh, example. I think lack of education. So resources for parents or lack of to help them understand how they can do a better job to help their kids through the youth sports process. We're gonna go with that.
So, what do they essentially, you're saying they don't know what they don't know?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, a parent obviously cares about their child, as we all do, and I think trying to come up with some resources, courses, newsletters, all of the information to help kind of inform them a little bit more. And then to me, it goes back to being being present but less involved. Uh, the kid's journey, not the parents, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, where do you start with parents other than make it the kid's journey, not yours?
Uh, so in my experience, and this is a tough one, you've got to, just like anything else in life, business, whatever. I think it's an expectation thing. So, um, if we talk about any youth sport currently, the you kind of touched on this from your volleyball experience too. So you've got typically a young coach that is meeting people for the first time, and they've they don't have a great deal of time to build any trust, maybe even respect from the parents. And then the first thing out of the gate they're telling them is, you need to listen to me. Don't tell your kid what to do. You need to trust me. I just think the whole starting point is really messed up. So, long answer, but expectations. But I feel like the coaches have been set up to fail, truthfully. Um, so, that's maybe a whole podcast topic. So I don't know what you think on that.
Well, that's what led Dustin and I to doing this thing on some level is, I mean, I think you look at college level coaching, um, there's very little training. It's like, oh, you played, you're interested in coaching, go for it. As opposed to think how much training a high school teacher has to do just from getting a degree, professional development, all that kind of stuff. And then in college coaching or youth sports, there is zero barrier to entry.
Yep.
And how do we train coaches to have some sort of framework? Um, yeah, because they don't know what they don't know either. So how do you help to eliminate some of the tough spots that come up?
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, that just made me think of something entirely different. That you've got to be a teacher, you've got to have a degree minimum. A lot of them are then doing their master's degrees. I mean, they're so different. I got a lot of ideas on that, but to be a teacher, you need a degree. You need a lot of them are doing master's degrees. Obviously, they're trying to get better in their trade, their craft. But like you said, obviously my world that I exist in is soccer. If you unfortunately with a lot of the clubs because it's so hard to find coaches. A lot of them get into it maybe for the wrong reasons and don't stick around. So I, it'd be interesting to see what the attrition rate is on young coaches coming in. But if you kicked a soccer ball in high school and you were considered a decent player, then hey, you should be a coach. Well, that doesn't mean that I know we could go in a million different directions on this, but um, it goes back to that whole expectation thing at the start. The parents are paying typically 2,500 to 3,000 a year, and I've been reading a lot about this recently. And naturally, so they expect a high level professional coach to be at the tryout, talking to them at the tryout, hopefully giving them a spot on the team. But realistically, they've got somebody who's probably doing it part time,
Mhm.
maybe doing it for the first time. Who knows? So that I just feel like the coaches are being set up to fail. So it's a
And
tough one.
and I think they have all sorts of power that they may or may not realize. Like over the holiday, I think I told you this story. My sister and her husband were talking about one sport their 7th graders playing. And I
Right?
go, "We have to do this, this, and this." And I'm like, "No, you don't." And I can't remember what it was. And they were adamant they had to. And because that's what their coach told them. And I'm like, "Tell me about your coach." "Oh, it's just a recent college grad, this and that." And it's not to be a shot at young people, but it's like I turned to him, I go, "Why would that person have more credibility than me on this topic?" And and,
Yeah.
as somebody that's worked in college athletics for 20 years, and they're talking about how to get to college and whatnot, and they're like, "Huh, I never thought of that." But
Yeah.
it's just like that position of power the coach has, that's real.
Yep.
Um, and there's some sort of obligation for the somebody within the system to educate them and also them to understand that.
Exactly. And I think another thing too, you know, it's so transactional, at least from like I said, from in club sports, like the it might be about to change, but a lot of the tryouts are on the same day. So you got to go, and then the coaches, I made a comment in the first one about a lot of the coaches are not great coaches and they're really bad salespeople, right? So like you go to the tryout and they're basically giving you the fear of loss that if you don't sign on the dotted line today, there's no guarantee your spot's going to be there tomorrow. So the parents are almost like you're at a used car dealership and it's like, do you want to buy the red one or the green one? Um, and they're making this rash decision that they don't even really know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
They barely know the coach. You know, um, One of the things I've been researching a lot recently about this whole topic is something for parents to like really do their research. Like you said, you're going to research what school your kids go to. Uh, if you need a plumber, you're going to research multiple plumbers to make sure they're good plumbers. But then you just show up to a soccer club because your neighbor says, "Hey, you should go to this one." You know, they got really nice uniforms and they go to Chicago for tournaments.
Yeah.
Um, it's not really a reason to throw your kid in the middle of it.
So, what do you two-part question. Where do parents unintentionally make things worse for their kids' athletic experience? And then what does good parental involvement look like?
Okay, great question because I'm kind of going through this with my daughter, 13-year-old. I've coached her since she was 6. Last year, she was playing up on our club team, and I wanted to get her at the right age group, so I found a new coach, and younger guy doing a great job. But I'm kind of going through this right now. So over involvement, back to your initial question, and that I mean the list is long on this. So over involvement in the house, talking about the sport, over involvement on the way to practice, over involvement at practice, after practice, before games, during games, after games. The list goes on, right? So I would say over involvement and not knowing when to excuse me, support their kid. And like I said, it goes back to the whose journey is it. Um, right now, my daughter's a good player. She's playing at a mid-level on a mid-level team, which is great. Great team, great coach. And asked the other day, I asked her, would you want to try and take it a little bit more seriously? I didn't say to her, you should take it more seriously. I wanted to see what she said. So I think sometimes parents just kind of make that decision without really knowing what the kid wants, you know? Hopefully that gives a little perspective.
Yeah. So name 2 or 3 things that you'd look at and say, "Yeah, this parent's doing it right with youth sports and their kid."
Oof.
I was
Uh,
script there, so we'll see.
no, no. No, no, that's a good question. I think a lot of it, simple things like dropping them off to practice and not necessarily being at the practice, you know? And that sounds simple, but it's like, "Hey, have fun." You know, I love watching you practice, but this is your practice. I want it to be, your time with the coach or whatever, right? So that could be one example. Um, Definitely during games, involvement during games, what they say, when they say it, etc. Uh, you said 3 things, right?
I said 2 or 3, so
2 or 3? Does that qualify?
that can qualify.
Okay. Maybe we can come back to that one if you wanna revisit it.
Yeah, so we talked, I think it was in the last episode, I can't remember. We talked it seems like we're talking and texting a lot, but, uh, um, we both seem to agree that there's some level of pay to play that isn't going away. So, by pay to play, I mean you're gonna pay your fee to the club and you're gonna play, play on the team. How do we deal with this in the most healthy way possible? Uh, I overheard,
Mm.
like, at my daughter's volleyball tournament last weekend, some well-intentioned everybody's well-intentioned, but parents frustrated, they paid this fee for club volleyball, then their kid is essentially a backup, and all those different elements, and this is freaking 6th grade, so, yeah, how do we deal with pay to play in the most healthy way?
Oof. Uh, I think it goes back to as early in the process as possible that you can get the kid, the family in the right environment. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, if you go to a club, their rec program is going to be really identifying kids early. And then at some point, they're going to try and move them out of the rec program into the, you know, development or whatever it is called. Um, I think keeping kids, we've talked about this before. And I mean, this is your world. What do you look like? What do you look for in college prospects, right? And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but try and encourage multi sports.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't mean multi club sports. That I absolutely don't necessarily agree with because your kid's definitely going to burn out if they go into, a volleyball and a soccer or basketball on multiple nights. Um, I think keeping it grassroots as long as you can and doing it for fun, not, supposedly to be more competitive. Um, but ultimately, I mean, I don't know how we do this, but one of the things that I'd like to try and see is a more detailed evaluation at the start, not just, "Hey, your kid's really fast. I want to give him a spot on the team." You know, really kind of diving into it a little bit more deeper. And it's hard because they're a kid, but getting their perspective, not necessarily what the parents think is best for the kid. Does that make sense?
That does. So do you think we'll see pay for play escalate in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you think what tipping point, or where do you see that?
I'm reading a lot of the stats on it at the moment, and participation is up significantly
Mhm.
on last year. But I saw something recently where the kind of negative side of the youth sports world is now being discussed, you know, uh, in the government as to, what's right and wrong and what can be done about it. So, yes, I think it's gonna go up if people don't get the right education and resources, because I hear this all the time, it's like, "Well, my kid's really good at rec and they're 7. If I don't do this, then, they're gonna miss out." And it's, what are they gonna miss out on?
Yeah.
Are they gonna miss out on quitting by the time they're 13?
Yeah. Um, what percent of kids quit by the time they're 13? What's that data point?
I think it's hard to find a very clear answer, but it's they based on all the stuff I've read, 70% roughly at 13.
Wow.
And again, although the participation rate's going up, which is awesome, and I read this morning on, I think it's on the Aspen Institute, but it's great the participation rate's going up, but if they're participating in the wrong things, I think it could affect the dropout rate.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's such a shame if kids are dropping out. If it goes down to 12, you know, and I'm no voice on this, but developmental, kids, girls, boys develop at different stages physically, mentally. You know, you could be losing like future all stars because they had a bad experience when they were 9 and they didn't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a sad story.
So
But
I have 2 questions, but they're gonna be unrelated. So this one's related to that. Why why do you think people should care? Play till you're 13, be done, and then go on to other things. I know I struggle with that sometimes with some of my kids who feel them tested kind of off the charts intellectually, but they're obsessed with sports. And I'm kinda like, "Don't you wanna go do debate camp and go to engineering, do all those things and get your powerful brain growing even more," but they wanna play sports. So, why does should the burnout matter, I guess is what I'm wondering. What's your perspective?
oof. Uh, hmm, that's a good one. I think, you know, I can relate to this with our kids. We got 4 kids. They were all, you know, showed some promise in sports. All of them played soccer. I coached them all. About to possibly do another rec team for my youngest, who's 9. My I really struggle with this. I mean, vulnerable moment. But when our youngest was 6, he could be the best player on the team or the worst player at any given moment, and that was a tough one for me being the coach. You know, uh, but what I learned in all of this experience coaching my kids was, it's really about what they want to do.
Yeah.
I think the burnout would be less, and again, this is just me shooting from the hip. If the kids were doing it because they wanna do it, compared to the parents wanting them to do it, maybe the burnout rate would actually be lower, and they would play, you know, till they're 14, maybe even 15, right? Um, but I think they get so focused because the parents are like, they gotta get the D1 scholarship, and I mean, you know this more about this than me, like, I would like to see parents backing their kids in what they wanna do, not what society wants them to do. Does that make sense?
No, that does. So my wife thinks I'm kind of crazy on this. this opinion, so feel free to disagree. I have a belief that we should not go to all our kids' athletic events. Because if they wanna do it, they should do it because they enjoy it, and I think we should intentionally not go to all their games. I enjoy watching them play. My wife loves watching them play. Um, but yeah, I feel pretty strongly about that, but my wife's pretty bright and disagrees. So do you think parents should go to every single game and a lot of practices?
Okay, common theme on this one. I'm not gonna agree or disagree with you or your wife on this, but I'll answer that question. Maybe I will, but I think it. Hopefully, one thing that you can keep picking up, and people who are listening to this will see. To me, it all goes back to the kid, right? So
Mm,
this sounds crazy, but ask your ask your kid. You know, not you personally, but anyone who's listening to this. Hey, do you like watching? Do you like it? Uh, do you like it when I come and watch? You know, um, my son, for example, has told me that he used to play better in club basketball when I wasn't in the stands watching sometimes, because maybe he was putting too much pressure on himself. I don't know. And I was still kind of learning this back then.
mhm.
But then my 13-year-old who's still playing soccer, she loves me watching it. It's I think it comes back to it's giving that empowering the child to make the decision. You know, what do you want us to do? Because that you got to remember that's a tough one for some parents because now they've got to own whatever the kid says. You know, uh, and
Should it be the kid's call, though? I mean, their opinion's great, but
it could be, hey, I love watching you play, but I don't like it when you. I don't mean you personally, or your wife, but I don't like it when you shout at the ref. You know, like dive in a little bit deeper. Hey, son or daughter, what do you like about me coming to watch? I love it when you're there, but I don't like it when you shout at the ref. Whatever. Maybe just I don't think maybe giving them the full decision because they're, a young kid, obviously,
Mhm.
but diving in a bit deeper. And I had this conversation with lots of parents on my old team, and it was, hey, like ask them what they want you to do, but then the hard part is doing what they want you to do, you know, from a spectator standpoint.
Mhm.
Like when I go to games, I literally don't say anything. I just stand there. People probably don't even think I'm even watching.
Yeah.
I am. I just, you know,
Well,
whatever I say in that game's not gonna help my daughter.
yeah, yeah. I would argue, though, that even if your kid says, "Yeah, I watch you at every game, and that's important to me," I would still tell my kid, I'm like, "Hey, I love you. I'm in front of most of them, but you also need to do this for you, and I'm not gonna be at every game. So, if that's a deal breaker, then you shouldn't call."
Yeah.
Too harsh?
No, I think it's a good idea. I think like I said, it goes back to you know, can we blame all of this on parents? I don't know. That's a very broad statement. But if parents had less involvement and maybe led their kids differently, maybe the youth sports world wouldn't be so chaotic, you know? Um, like if you run into a problem and you're not a starter on the team, don't go find another team. Talk to the coach and figure out what you did and what you can do to get better and how can you help the team, you know? Because one of the big issues is people constantly bouncing around. It's like I've never really heard it framed like that. I think you might be onto something there, you know, that you're
Yeah,
really empowering them on their journey, not yours.
yeah. So I'm gonna shift a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about pay to play, and it's hard to envision any other system but what we have, um, in terms of if you wanna be competitive, you're playing on the club teams and you're traveling and all that kind of stuff. You've told me about a different model that you researched in Norway.
Yep.
Uh, talk about that a little bit.
Uh, okay. Now I gotta dive back into the brain a little bit. So they don't play and again, don't quote me on this exactly. This is me going off memory, but they don't play organized sports till they're 13, I think.
Mhm.
Uh, or what we consider to be like club sports.
Yeah, it's
They're
all
not on more.
like
Yeah,
YMCA stuff, I think, if I
yeah, yeah. I,
describe it to you.
I and again, I'm not in Norway, but the mental health of the kids apparently in the youth sports system in Norway is a lot different to what we're dealing with in the US. And again, I I've brought this up to a couple of people and they're like, this is America, we're not Norway. So, you're fighting but I think if you position it the right way, um yeah, that was something I found in my research that their whole system is significantly different to ours. And they I don't see why we can't create, you know, localized leagues. I mean, you don't have to go on it's all money driven, so I could dive in a bit deeper on some more research if we ever do this again, but uh I know it's not driven by money in Norway, you know?
Yeah. I'd say that's I think one of the hard parts of change on this is there's a lot of good people making their livelihoods through youth sports and club sports, and
Yeah.
this be a significant shift.
Oh yeah. I mean it's a $40 billion industry now in the US. Supposed to get to 60 by 2030, so hopefully there's going to be some people that potentially me included that might do some things that help people rather than just add to the dumpster fire.
Yeah. Well, that's a question I had for you. So look in 5, let's say 10 years in the future, if we don't change anything, where is youth sports in 10 years? Except for a much bigger business, like go deep.
Uh Sadly I think the dropout rate is going to get lower because one of the things that I'd like to see change is let's use like Australia for example, right? They got the Australian Institute of Sport and there's no governing bodies for um you know what's the right word? Not the management of sports maybe. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's like the Wild West, it's like, if you wanted to set up your own volleyball club next week in Wichita, you could.
Yep.
We're gonna open up a volleyball club. There's no I outside of safe sport, and I've been looking into this pretty deeply. I feel like there needs to be more regulations and, you're way smarter than I am when it comes to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm using the wrong terms, but more regulations, more maybe guidelines in place that, you know, just sticking a kid on a roster to fill a roster, while it helps the club's bottom line, it doesn't help the kid. It doesn't help youth sports. Like there needs to be things done to try and manage that differently and maybe, what happens if it's not done correctly, because I feel like if we keep going like we are, like you said, the revenue is gonna go up, but at what cost? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I go back to the barrier of entry thing of, like, what is the minimum standards, um, we have for somebody to coach or run these organizations? Because right now, it's like I like this illustration. Did you ever see the movie The Little Giants?
No.
I think it's mid-90s about youth football, and essentially, there's a good team and a bad team in town, and the bad team is recruiting players, um and he's going around and he goes up to this kid and goes, "You like football?" "No." The kid says, "No." "You ever played football?" Kid says, "No." He says, "Good, you can be on our team." And there's an element of this in coaching too, and, like, how do we I think your safe sport thing is a safe sport example, and integration there is very, very, very important. But even beyond that, what are minimum standards that it seems like most countries have around the world except for us?
Yeah, I mean, th there just isn't any. I'm not gonna get into specifics, obviously, because 'cause I've been behind the curtain on some of this stuff. I've seen, you know, which is why I'm not coaching club sports anymore, club soccer at least. Um, it's all driven by money. There's a very limited pool of players. Like, I'll just talk about Kansas City. Very limited pool of players. They're all trying to get the same players, and it's like, how can each club undercut each other to try and get those players? It's just it's not healthy. Um, there's too many clubs, not enough players, and not that I wanna see people, lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods, but I feel like if there is a shift that I'd like to see, some of these clubs that aren't doing it the right way shouldn't be operating anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So, I I may end up upsetting a few people down the line, but I'm not intentionally trying to do that. I'm trying to help like I said, it goes back to the kid.
Mhm.
Um, and I've seen some horror stories, and I know some families that have got, you know, real life PTSD from something that they thought was gonna be a good experience.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, well, any final thoughts before we go to the rapid fire round?
Uh, you threw a couple at me that I didn't have a chance to think about, so I appreciate you keeping me on my toes, but no, I'm good. Let's go rapid fire.
All right. So, got a few questions. You have no longer than 30 seconds, preferably a little faster to
Okay,
answer each of them. Ready?
go.
What is one book that has greatly influenced your life and why?
Golf is Not a Game of Perfect by Dr. Bob Rotella, sports psychologist. Why did it influence me? I read it when I was a kid, when I was a decent golfer, and it's just helped kind of shape what I'm trying to do now from a company perspective.
There you go. How has a failure set you up for later success?
Oof. Uh, hmm. Sporting or just general?
First thing that comes to mind.
So when I was in food service, I moved into what I thought was going to be a different sector, bigger, greater, more accomplishments. And sadly, after a year, it didn't work out, and I didn't get let go, but I was about to be. So that was kind of a learning experience for me.
Yeah. What's your favorite podcast?
Hmm. Outside of this one, the sports psych show with Dan Abrahams. He's a high level sports psychologist from the UK.
In coaching, how do you define success?
Hmm. This is simple for me. I if I go if I'm around town and I see kids I've coached and they want to engage in me, they want to talk to me. Hey, coach, how you doing? Parents are happy to see me. That's success.
Right on. And last one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Uh, believing in God, growing in my faith, without a doubt.
Right on.
That's how I met you, I'd say.
Yep. Yep. Cool. Well, we'll wrap up there. This has been really good. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem. Thanks, Rob. Take care.
Yep.
All right, bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Coaching. We hope today's discussion provided you with insights in understanding and leading. As always, Thank you to the 3D Institute and Friends University for their support and passion for empowering leaders. If you have any questions for today's guest or for Rob Ramsire, all of our contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in.